normally the format of this is there's two parts. There's the expat and the entrepreneur. So sort of deal with the expat side first and then go on to the business later. But I think that's going to be very interesting to hear how your business is going with the current situation. You're probably quite more exposed to that than a lot of people I've spoken to. So from the expat point of view, I mean, as far back as you want to go in your journey so far, how towards ending up where you are today, where you came from, what led to you living abroad, basically.
So I'm Nicole, and let's see where my story goes back. I'd have to say back to when I was born. So I actually come from an immigrant family. My mother being from Dominican Republic, my dad being from Puerto Rico. And they moved to the States, and that was the first, I would say, journey of my family immigrating abroad. But not only did they move abroad, but my dad also was in the military. So as a child, I was growing up in an immigrant family, also in the military. And that, I think, sparked my natural interest in different cultures and of course, traveling, but also moving. Because as a military brat are known to move frequently, that has always been kind of who I am, of just moving different places. I lived in different cities, different states, all in the US. And just several years ago, started thinking about outside of the US. So I was last in New York, and was really just trying to see, okay, where do I see my next stage in life? There's this natural feeling you get when you feel like a chapter is closing where you are, where you just feel like, you know what, I think that I experienced what I needed to experience here. You made the friends, memories of that place, but you just have this longing for another place. And I don't know if this is just something that military brats have or if it's natural, but usually every few years I've moved, and it was that time. And so when I started researching, I started looking at, okay, where could I go? And I started looking at internationally, what are the options? Because I never lived abroad and I had never really researched of what exactly was required. So when I started researching for moving abroad, I was stressed. I was just like confused, exactly like what in the world do I need to do? And even pick like where do we want to go? So I actually came across a French tech visa. And so when I was like putting together my list of, okay, what's really important for me, I started off with just mapping out, okay, I really want a central location where I can easily travel and explore other places, a place that has decent weather, so definitely not freezing temperatures. Then it was like, okay, good food. And also what was important for me as an entrepreneur in tech was to also find a place that had a tech ecosystem. Sure. And so when I started researching, okay, what places there are available, I started looking at the visas, and the French tech visa popped up. I had never heard of it, and looked at what the requirements were. And I was like, oh, this is actually pretty straightforward. Like, this seems pretty simple and what's required. So I applied for the visa, and lo and behold, like 2 weeks later, got accepted for this visa. And it just was like, oh my gosh, like we can actually move, and was not expecting that kind of a quick experience. Now, of course, I researched like crazy. So it sounds super simple, me explaining it like this, but behind the scenes, what was happening was me like reading every possible blog, listening to every podcast about moving abroad, watching YouTube videos, and just trying to understand like, okay, what do I need to do to go? But when I applied, it was like really, really quick for us.
Yeah, that's very, very quick, 2 weeks. What for people who are interested in that, what are the terms of that visa? Is it a complicated application process?
Yeah, so the French tech, there's actually a few different tech visas. I believe Spain has one, France. There's a few countries that have this tech visa, but this specific one in France, they have three options. There's one, you as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you as an employee of a tech startup, or as an investor of a tech startup.
Okay.
And as a founder, the requirement was I needed to provide or get accepted into a French tech accelerator.
Okay.
So I needed to be accepted into a program, and I think there was about 20 different programs throughout France. And so I needed to apply, have them accept me, because that basically allows them to do the due diligence of, do they have a tech background? I also needed to show that I had some kind of tech background, or kind of to de-risk the fact that, yes, I work in tech. Yes, I've actually had a tech startup before. And so those things were important for them to know, like, okay, do they have a certain standard? Do they have certain experience? And then we needed to show a certain proof of savings. Usually that's required for any visa, really.
Yeah.
And I think that was about it.
Interesting. That's
yeah.
So the accelerator program provides a funding input into your business as well?
No.
No. Okay.
Actually, no. So the only reason why they require you acceptance into a specific tech accelerator program is because they just want to make sure that they do the interviewing process, that they see your project as something that could be beneficial in France, that could have international opportunities. And they did not provide funding. As a matter of fact, the program that I was accepted into accepted me with just an idea. I did not have a product. I did not have customers. I did not really know what I was going to be developing, but I had presented my thoughts, and I knew it was around expats. So
wow, that's very impressive.
Yeah.
I would have thought they wanted like a detailed business plan, timeline horizons. So you literally just said, this is the idea.
Yeah, not all of them are like that. So I did apply to a few throughout France, because once I did get rejected by one, and they were looking at a startup more advanced, so more in the developed stage. And since I was just presenting a new project, I was like, okay, which ones don't require a full developed project? Yeah.
Cool. And so does the one you get accepted into, does that have any bearing on geographically where you have to go in France?
Yeah, so actually for this visa, you just need to participate in the program. So when I arrived September 2019. Okay. And that was for a 3-month-long program. And so it wasn't intense, needed to be there for workshops, getting to know other founders as well. It was very intense because it was in French, and I was not yet fluent in French. I'm still not fluent in French, but then I was way less understanding anything. So it was very intense. And after the 3 months, so it was based in Lyon. After the 3 months, technically you can move anywhere in France. The French tech visa allows a 4-year renewable visa. And so we technically have 4 years to be anywhere in France, and then can renew. Of course, now those are different requirements, but can renew in order to extend the visa.
Awesome. That sounds like an interesting initiative. This might be anecdotal, but it does seem like out of all the expat communities, I mean, I'm in the Middle East, and obviously we have hundreds of thousands of British, we have millions of Asians, and I think it's about 15,000 Americans. So it's actually quite rare to come across American expats here anyway. And even had a similar experience in Australia. I think the only other place where I met a lot of Americans was in the Philippines, but that's for obvious reasons. They have military bases and what have you.
That's true.
So do you think there's a reason why not so many Americans look beyond America really as a place?
That is a really good question. I think it's a cultural point, because in the US, having been raised in the US, I don't see that there's a lot of emphasis on cultural education. It's not really part of, I mean, there's history courses, of course, but there's no real trips to other countries to really explore like other cultures. And I feel honestly, like my education in the US, I didn't get to know more about other cultures as much as I think anyone in, for example, Europe can easily travel and just like from as if one state to another, but here country to country is just so easy to travel that you can immerse yourself completely to actually see, touch, feel, sense, be immersed in a completely different culture and language. Whereas in the US, because it's so far, and there's so many different things within the US that there are to discover, I think that they don't really go outside of the US. And I think that's a shame. I honestly think that it should be more, I think there needs to be more cultural immersion. I mean, same thing in even within the US, you know, there's, you know, political things that happen, and even just like minorities, kind of things that they experience. And I think it's a lack of cultural education. I actually even say, I think every person should live in a foreign country at least 1 year out of their life. I think our world would be a better place. I think people would have a better perspective and worldview and understanding and empathy for others. And as American, I think that definitely there should be more of that, just cultural immersion. I think actually now there may be an increase because of, for example, digital nomad visas, which have been popping up all over. And I think that's becoming more attractive to Americans to look outside of the US to have their own business or to work remotely. And I think that's going to open up a lot of doors for people to basically see beyond like the traditional expatriation.
I mean, obviously the other thing to that is most Europeans here are motivated by tax benefits, which doesn't, you guys don't have that, unfortunately. So do you think that some people look at that and think, well, that there's not really any necessarily any monetary value to my life, it's purely just a cultural benefit, and that perhaps limits it? Or I'm not sure exactly on the ins and outs of FATCA and how that impacts Americans in Europe. So I don't know, does that have any bearing, or does it not really make any difference to you as a person living there that you have that FATCA thing in place?
Yeah, it is definitely tricky. You know, there's a lot of red tape that Americans have to go through when living abroad. Just opening up a bank account is very difficult. I had a challenge. I know many Americans that have that challenge. It's just, for now, it's unfortunately the case. We have to always report our income taxes to the US. If we are a citizen there, and we also have to file taxes where we're living. And so that definitely adds a lot of complexity. I would say a lot of expats, American expats, don't know about this until they arrive. Right. Or they're not sure how bad it is until they arrive, because really it's almost like bank by bank. One bank may have a nice banker and be fine filling out paperwork, whereas another one may just not want to. And so it's really tricky. And I'd say, yeah, that can definitely impact someone's experience of going abroad. But there's also a lot of neobanks that have been popping up. I mean, you have also companies like Wise, and 26, you have some of these options that can allow somebody to have multiple currencies. And I think that's actually changing the way people manage their money. I think it's still not there like completely to replace a bank, but it's certainly kind of the interim that people could use as they get set up.
Yeah. No, I actually think it's further along than a lot of people realize. 100% of my banking is on a digital application. I get paid into it in dirhams, and it's a European-based company. I have no local banking infrastructure. I mean, I have one. It doesn't get used, but I think that's not far off. You're right. That's definitely the way it's headed, isn't it?
The online bankings, yes, I think they are pretty far ahead, but different countries require different things. For example, in France, you do need to have a physical bank in France. You need to have a French IBAN in order to rent an apartment, for example, or to get a phone. So that does cause complexity. Whereas, for example, some of these online banks will give you like a Belgian IBAN, but that doesn't qualify for the requirements for housing here. So there's so many different intricacies beyond the banking. But I think that they're pushing the thresholds for getting that into these more tight cultures that are used to traditional banking.
Interesting. And how are you finding France? If you don't mind me asking, you've been there a few years now?
2 years. I've been here 2 years. I mean, I think that it's been a really beautiful experience. I love the architecture, the food. The food is good, but when you are comparing to your own cultural food, so being raised with Dominican food, it's very hard to compare. We love carbs. So I like Italian food, but Italy's not too far. So far experience has been really great. I think people have been very friendly and warm. Obviously, we've had to learn French. I mean, and that's natural to have to learn the language as much as possible, because in some cases it can be very tricky which language to learn. And I think that my experience here honestly has helped me become a better person. I think it's helped me to really see the world not just through the eyes of immigrant parents, but from my own experience now. And I even say that my connection with my family has become even stronger, because now I understand the pain points that they've gone through of moving, and just like the simple things of finding ingredients at the market, or figuring out how to even get a Metro card, just silly things like that. But they can impact your entire experience, or a day. You could have just a day of like, why is nothing working for me? So, but yeah, my experience has been really great. I love it here. I plan on staying for a long time. But as somebody who's now experienced living abroad, you just never know what country might be next. It's like traveling. Once you get that travel bug, like you just want to keep traveling. And I think that also maybe in terms of moving and experiencing different cultures.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense, like especially in Europe, because moving from one European country to another, like you said, is actually not that far. I always forget how just massive America is. So you can get across 15 countries, whereas in America you just got from one end to the other or whatever. So you could
drive 10 hours and still be in the same state.
It's crazy.
So
but
not even just the distance, it's also the price. Surprisingly, even just traveling in the US, flying from, let's say, New York to Florida, you could pay $200+ round trip. $200 for European flights, that's like 5 trips. You can, or train. So you spend a lot. And I think that also makes it more difficult for people for traveling, even within the US. So compared to here in Europe.
True. I suppose the flip side is you're at the mercy of, Ryanair, EasyJet and the likes, which is not exactly a luxury experience, but you're right, it's very, very cheap. And in terms of doing business in France, I guess because you're an online operation, have you found any issues, any unexpected, things that have come about which are different from what you're used to while setting up?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything. It's one thing moving here, but it was another. I moved here at the same time that I was starting a business. And so it's like culture overload, or, you know, you're just sensory overload with just so many different things, trying to figure out and get settled while trying to also figure out who's my market, what pain point am I solving, how can I build something that is not a traditional business, but innovative enough that's solving, you know, something for expats. And so my experience when I arrived was just really understanding a lot of the cultural difference. I think that was a big impact for me, because being in the US, I started a US company before, and so I already knew the process. How do I register the business? What services are available? What kind of grants and programs? Where can I get assistance? I already knew that part. I also knew culturally how the market is with certain innovation. But then moving to Europe, you start realizing different ways of the way people value certain things. For example, here they take their time to drink a cafe, or, you know, whereas in the US, find things to be very efficient, very quick. And here it's finding the balance between tech, but also human centric. And so when I was launching Avvinue, that's when I started really diving deeper into like, what pain points are people having? I spoke to a lot of expats, not just Americans, but from anywhere, and started really saying, okay, where are they having challenges? Is it the actual integration? Is it actually deciding where to move? And so I was just really diving into that. Once I was ready to launch Avvinue, now became the tricky part of getting legal agreements, getting accounting set up, getting all of these aspects in French, because all of them needed to be in French, was very tricky. So even learning the VAT system, which I wasn't familiar with, I don't think anyone really understands the VAT, but it exists, and we have to, you know, make sure that we're compliant.
That's something which I find absolutely mental, is that VAT in the States isn't included in the price. So if anything, you guys are incredible with it, because you buy stuff and pay a different price from what it says on it. So was that simpler compared to that? Because I presume in France, everything's sort of factored in at point of sale or point of cost or whatever it is that you're doing.
As a consumer, it's much easier here when it's included. If I know that it's €3, it's €3. Great. I can give you €3. In the US, when it comes to eating out or even ordering drinks, now you have to pay 15-20% of that, whether they gave you good service or not, or, you know, it's recommended as a tip, that throws you off. And actually now, having traveled back, I was like, oh, I hate this. Like, why do I now need to recalculate? Why not just include it and they manage the rest? On a business perspective, it's different. On a business perspective, it's interesting applying VAT and understanding, where does VAT apply? Business to business is different than business to consumer. And then depending on where the consumer is based, then they're charged certain taxes. So, or what type of service it is versus product. And so there's so many complexities there. Even VAT in Europe, there's also VAT in other countries. And so what all those dynamics are is really complex. But as a consumer, definitely appreciate the price built in. But as a business, it's overwhelming. So that's something that any online business or any entrepreneur needs to understand. Same thing with tax. It's like the saying, you need to make sure you have a good tax and legal. Like those two are ones I always have from day one. So,
Cool. I guess we should probably explain what your business is. And
Yeah.
also, if you wouldn't mind, how it came about. And you mentioned you actually had a few other businesses before. So were they similar? Did they all sort of compound towards this current one, or were they all slightly different?
Yeah, great question. So my previous startups, was a workout partner app. Sorry, okay. I'm like, which one should I mention first? Well, my first business was actually event planning. So I did do wedding coordination. I'm very much into planning. So I did that when I graduated university, so back in 2011. And I immediately started my own business. And it was a really great experience understanding how to set up a business, all of these kind of the legal structure, also how to find customers, how to present businesses. It was very great for my first experience. What I did learn from that was I don't like being in the service-based business where you work per hours and that's when you get paid. So I was always looking for how can I create something that allows me to make money while you sleep. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, so as I was building out that first business, I also created my first website. And that's when I started really diving more into tech. I became very passionate about developing websites, and I actually started doing it for people, doing it for businesses, and then actually switched my career into technical project management. So it was like combining both of my passions. My last startup that I launched is called NGFit, and it was a workout partner app. So people could find other people to work out with. And that was really exciting because that was my first mobile app in the App Store. I got to learn, okay, mobile is a whole different ballgame than web. Yeah. And just trying to figure out how do you market that? How do you get that in front of people? And honestly, I think that experience allowed me really to learn like lessons learned, mistakes of what I now have applied to Avvinue, which is my current startup. So Avvinue is a moving and relocation marketplace. So one central platform where people can coordinate various logistics for their move, whether it's down the block or around the world, they can coordinate in one place. And it's been really exciting because that's where a lot of people have shared their pain points in moving is just, they have to go to so many different places to figure out what to do. They have to research so many places. They have to compare quotes. They have no idea how much things will cost for shipping, for immigration. And so we've actually centralized this entire process for people to now plan and coordinate in one place.
It's very cool. And I've been lucky enough to see it, and I think it's great, and it's super, super simple. You know, it's it just makes, which is a massively complicated task into a very clear pathway, which I think is going to benefit a huge amount of people. Obviously, you've sort of brought it about at quite an interesting time in the world. So,
this is true.
Yeah, which is obviously not your fault either. But you know, who was to know that would happen? But how has that affected the business in any way in terms of, you know, your expectations for growth and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think March 2020 hit everyone unexpectedly. You know, there's even companies that have closed business. You see, you know, even online ones, just because the world has changed. People have different demands, people have different desires, but we held strong. In March, we did see a huge stop to international moving, and that was expected. We saw, but those were new moves. There was a lot of movement of actual people relocating back to their home country. So there was a lot of movement, just in a different way. So this was something we hadn't experienced before. It was just an influx of people moving back. Then there was also Brexit that occurred. So now you saw another, like a lot of people moving out of the UK. And so it just was like interesting changes in the world. So we did see a halt for a lot of people that we were expecting, but that still didn't mean we couldn't assist people. So people still had in mind that they wanted to move. Some people actually decided they didn't want to move anymore. but a lot of them continued their move a year later. So we've actually helped people that originally we were working with in March. Then after, let's say, now starting this new year, we started seeing borders opening up, and that helps people kind of have see the light at the end of the tunnel. For example, there are opportunities. You saw a lot of companies switching to remote working. So remote working surprisingly has impacted people to move. A lot of people from inner cities are moving to more rural areas. You're seeing a lot of movement because of tax reasons. Also, a lot of people, even in the US, moving from California to less tax heavy states. Then you also see digital nomad visas popped up. I mean, there's more than 18 now. And those allow remote workers to live there. And on top of that, there's also cities that are incentivizing people to move there. They're literally paying people to move there. And it's really, yes, it's really interesting. There's more than 12 cities and states that will give you, I mean, it could be 1,200, 3,000 to 10,000 just to relocate there. And that's also, again, because of this remote world that we live in. And so there's movement. It's just different types of movement.
I think that if anything, makes it a more interesting market, you know, because I think some of those moves would have been, so typically a move would be planned over a long period of time. So, you know, people expect to have to research and do everything. But if it's sort of a last minute, or, you know, they're making the most of an opportunity, or, you know, they've just reevaluated their life in the last few months, then I think that probably benefits your platform as well, because you're simplifying a process which they don't have a lot of time to deal with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you find this? Yeah.
Oh.
No, go for it.
I was going to say that point that you just made about people, you know, reflecting on their life these past months. I think that's the main point. I think people now are seeing the world differently because now they're more aligning where they live with their values. I think people are looking for a place that makes sense for them and their family and the quality of life that they want. I think traditionally, if you had to relocate, go to a specific city, maybe for a job offer, and you had to stay there 10, 15 years, you didn't really have much of a choice. You had to be close, you had to be in the office. Now on a remote, in a remote world, you have the option to now say, you know what, I actually always wanted to have a farm, and then go and actually have a farm and still be productive, still be successful in your work and contribute to the company and the future. So I think that's the main kind of purpose behind people's moves.
Yeah, that's an interesting one in itself, because I do think some people are very good at that, and it's going to work incredibly well for certain people. But I don't think working remotely is for everyone. You know, certainly myself, I put myself into that category, is that generally left to my own devices over a relatively short period of time, I do less and less useful things. So, you know, it's not for everyone, but I definitely think that doesn't really matter, because they don't know it's not for them. They're going to make the move. And then if anything, it's beneficial because they'll have to move back. And so you get the business twice, I suppose. So,
well, we definitely want them to have a successful move.
Yeah,
but in terms of remote working, it's not for everyone. You're right. I worked in the office for around 7 years, and then I actually worked remotely for a company for about 3 years. Working remotely is not for everyone. It takes a certain level of discipline. It also requires that you have a proper setup at home or wherever you plan on working. And it requires a very set schedule, because if you don't have this tight schedule of how you plan on mapping out your day, then yes, it can very much, change the way that you deliver results.
Yeah, of course.
But I definitely see, because there's a lot of people talking about remote work, they see, oh, this is the best, but they're very new to it and they haven't been doing it long enough to really see, is it the right thing for them? I've been doing it for years. So for me, transitioning, it did take a while. For example, a lot of people would talk about remote work now, like, oh, it's so great, I can work in pajamas, I can do that. Works for a short period of time. Pretty soon, you're going to want to wake up, get ready, feel like as if you were, as if you were going into an office, but not, just to get your mindset ready for work.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not for it doesn't apply to everyone, but I see that.
No, I agree with that. That's very true, and I think also space is critically important as well. If you have a designated space wherever you are, which is for work, that makes it easier. I think if the options of where you position yourself in your house are the couch or the kitchen counter, then that quickly, you're blending your sort of relaxation time with work time. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting change in society, and I'm certainly watching to see, that's going to change everything, and even investment strategies and all the things that we sort of have historical data on, they to some degree they get nullified by a big change like that. So it's exciting. What do you think, what are your plans for the business? Do you have fixed goals where you want to be in terms of user counts and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually been working with several companies in order to manage their lump sum relocation. So the untraditional relocation packages that some companies offer, they're actually managing it through Avvinue. So it's been really exciting because we do have, yes, the consumer side. We've always opened up for the average person who's moving, because we do want to simplify moving for anyone. But in terms of the business, we actually have a corporate approach, and we do offer companies their own portal. They can manage their own issuing of their lump sum relocations. And this applies not just for companies, but organizations. So like I was mentioning, cities that are incentivizing people to move there, they can better manage and support, because traditionally what people with or employees with a lump sum are usually given a lump sum of cash, or however that is applied, and then they're left to their own to figure out their move. And so you see a lot of unsuccessful relocations, kind of like how you mentioned, oh, they move, they realize it's not for them, then they move back. Sure. And in order to have a successful relocation, it's important to have support. And so that's where Avvinue, like you said, we simplify the process. We allow you to get what you need in one place, so that anyone, whether it's a lump sum or with a relocation package, can actually use Avvinue to do that. So we're excited. We've been onboarding companies. We're getting a lot of interest, a lot of demands for offering this, because traditional relocation management companies don't manage lump sum relocation. So this is definitely a great market for us and to present ourselves.
Yeah, and you're available globally, right? You're not any company anywhere. That's cool. So that means you have a large demographic of customers available. That's
absolutely
cool.
Yeah, services vary by country, of course, but the main services that we do offer, they're available. We have a huge footprint, and that's because we have as large of a footprint as our preferred suppliers and our partners. And so as long as we have those built up, we do cover a very large footprint. So
cool. Interesting that you said earlier, and this is going back off topic actually a little bit, that when you finished education, you started your own business straight away, and obviously you've had multiple businesses. Is there a reason why do you think that you went down that route rather than a more traditional, work through a company? Do you think it's just the way you're programmed, or is there, where does that come from, that drive to do that?
Yes. So I actually always did work in corporate. So what I did was I started these businesses on the side.
Oh, okay, smart.
Yeah. So I immediately, right after graduating, went into the corporate, worked for Fortune 500, then Fortune 100 companies. But as I was there, I always had this yearning to, I would say my intrinsic motivation is learning. For me, if I'm learning something new, then I will stay at that company for a long time. As soon as I stop learning, as soon as I stop growing in my own personal, just learning new tools, learning new processes, learning new strategic plans, you know, as soon as I stop learning, I feel like my time there is done. Yeah. And so what I would do while working at a company that maybe didn't provide this kind of growth inside the company, I would do it outside. And my way of doing that was getting just hands-on experience by starting a business. Where this actually comes from, I'll say, I think it comes from my grandmother. She is a businesswoman as well. She would talk about how she would always like do business, go country to country and sell things, go to Panama and bring things back and sell them in her country. And so it's lovely because when I speak with her, she always says, oh, you remind me of me when I was younger. So I'm going to say that it came from my grandmother.
That's very cool. Yeah. Cool. I think that's probably true of most of the people I've spoken to on here, actually, is that actually the last one, the same thing, you know, you're right. It comes from if you're exposed to that sort of environment, you know, I don't want to use the word hustler, but you know, someone that has always got something.
Yeah, we got that. We have that hustle.
Yeah.
I actually never saw her in action. I never saw her doing this business, but I know in her character, I can see that she won't take no for an answer. She's very confident in herself. And I think those are certain traits that are really important in business, especially, you know, since I've worked in the corporate sector, I understand how things work in the corporate side. I understand like there's certain things that if somebody is just an entrepreneur, they never worked in a corporate setting, they don't understand. And so I feel that, you know, some of those traits I saw from her. So, but yeah.
That's cool. If people want to find your app and everything, there's a website, you have social media and everything, if you want to plug, you know, where you are.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can find out about Avvinue. You can go on our website. It's avvinue.com. Avvinue spelled a little differently because we know we had to add a little touch in there. You can also find us on iOS or Android. So around the world, it's available in every app store. You can download the application, be able to plan and coordinate your move. Also on our social channels, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. And then of course, if you have a story that you want to share, we love highlighting people's moving stories on our blog as well. So feel free to reach out to our editorial team and we can highlight your journey because no two journeys are the same.
That's very cool. Do you use those examples? Do you sort of have like a rule of precedent in any way? Like if someone's done an unusual move, you know, then you sort of have a template which you can go back to, or no two moves the same?
I honestly say no two moves are the same. Okay. You can have two people moving from the same city, moving to the same city, and they will not have the same story. They will not have the same experience. And what may seem like, oh, I moved here to here to here, and here's how I did it. There's that side. There's also emotional side. People's experiences are very different. And so it transcends in the way that they write and how they share their story, where one story may touch someone in one way and the other one in a different way. And so that's why we accept any story, because it's part of your journey in life. And we love to celebrate those journeys. Some of them are fun and exciting and adventurous, and others are really scary. And, you know, and so we like to highlight them. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate your time.